Hey folks, it's Steve Wilmes and Matt Kita, and we're here with another great episode of the Risk Control. Hey Matt, how's it going?
Going great. How are you, Steve?
I'm good. I'm good. I think we're going to talk a little bit about emergency plans and emergency responses today. There's just a lot of craziness going on in the world. I mean, we got plane crashes, we got gas leaks, we got, you know, uh, chemical interactions, we got all this stuff, and it always comes to my mind when Matt and I are out in the field and we're training and we're talking to people, risk managers, safety directors, folks, and they are like, well, that'll never happen here.
One of the most common refrains that we hear, or if they don't say it, I can see it in their eyes, Steve.
Yeah. I could see it in their wallet. They're like, we don't want to pay for that. We don't want to pay for that. We don't want to do that. No, I think it's easy to paint employers as, negatively and really say like, oh, they just don't want to do these things. And I don't think that's a full picture. I think that some of that occurs here and there, but I think it's more rare than it is prevalent. Um, but there was a couple things that popped up here that I thought were really quite interesting. We had seen some news flashes. I don't know the full outcome of the story, but there's three stories here, and let me just put those on the screen. We have this Hemet Global Medical Center. They say mystery sickness. And Matt and I read through these comments. It's pretty funny stuff, actually. Not that people were ill, but it says right here, it was a sewer gas leak, right? Which is methane gas.
Right.
And then if you go down here, you get all kinds of stuff. Oh, it was mold. It was this. It was that. I saw something like, oh, where was it? Oh, this hospital's horrible. Like, there's never a gas leak anywhere in the world, Matt. Ever. My mom just died in the ICU. Okay. I'm that from the gas leak. So, yeah, people are just like, oh, it's COVID 20. Where was the one? The owner is a greedy foreigner. What? Okay. But there's just a whole lot of issues around this. And I think we look at gas leak and you look at a hospital and you got to say, oh, we got a bunch of patients that we have that may be affected by this. What's the emergency plan for that? How do we evacuate everyone if it's very serious? And then if we look at this one, this Camsberg company, there was a toxic cloud that's a soap dispenser or soap manufacturer or detergent manufacturer. And again, they allege that, they didn't do anything to protect people from this leak. And basically, they find this company for OSHA find this company for, what was it, Matt? Hazard communication and respiratory protection.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. You're all right here.
Your
Uh,
microphone's a
they,
little off, buddy.
can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, I think it was up a little bit. Very sensitive microphone. Good product. Um, yeah, they didn't have an emergency response plan in place. They didn't have their respiratory protection HAZCOM programs.
Allegedly.
Allegedly, yes. All this is alleged. Up to the level that up to the level of federal requirements. Again, allegedly. So
Yeah,
that
because
was
we know
that
you
was
get
their
we know you get a citation if you're missing one safety data sheet, even if it has nothing to do with anything
right, right,
that you even used the past 4 years. Oh, you're supposed to keep the records for 30 years. Oh, you missed
right.
one. Oh,
They were
okay.
fine. The citation penalties are $161,310
Yeah,
at this point.
a lot. Okay,
Yeah,
and then there was one more, and it was the I-80 truck stop, right?
the world's largest truck stop, Steve.
Yeah, have you been through it?
I have not. I haven't been to Iowa. I'd love to go. This is, you know me. This is right up my alley. I will absolutely visit this truck stop if I'm ever up on the
Well, this
I-80 in
is,
Iowa.
I mean, this is comparable to Wall Drug on the level uh,
Right, right.
what do they call that when you're famous?
Um,
Notoriety. Holy shit! Hold on.
yeah, I'm not sure,
Just all of a
but
sudden,
it's a thing,
yeah, notoriety. So you're notorious. This is one of them. So this one allegedly is fined $390,000
right?
for a fuel spill. And what's really interesting about this is there's some comments in here. Oddly, that's not required. Paperwork is. Heather, the vice president of IAD's group of operations and marketing, which gets really interesting when you look at some of these. Like, what is actually required here, and what do you need to do? And I think as we start to look at it, Matt, we always kind of look at, okay, is it really the employer? Is it the employees? What happened, right?
Right.
If you got a truck stop and you got management and risk management and you have safety, and especially at this size, um, those folks
Right.
can't be necessarily on site 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You have to rely on the underlying staff to communicate the plan and enact the procedures in that plan. Well, what does that mean? What do you think that means?
Going to have to ensure that they have knowledge of that plan, and look, maybe that is going to be about just training. Maybe it's about ensuring that, let's say, they click off on reading a plan. They might sign off on it, for instance, and then just doing maybe random checks where the supervisor will come in and just kind of observe them and see if they're following it, and kind of it's hard. The point is, Steve, that you're saying it, like, we can't just keep a supervisor there all the time. We can't keep a safety expert or somebody there all the time. That's cost prohibitive. You need to convince your staff that it's important and that they put it in place, that they follow those protocols
Well,
properly.
I think you can do a supervisor. I'm just saying that, when it comes to very technical requirements, sometimes
Mhm.
the people that interact with that um, have they need time off too, right? And you can't
Right.
necessarily afford to have 7 environmentalists there to be around the clock, and it's like, okay, so someone's got to pay. Yeah, they're on call always 365. It's just like you and I, we're on call 365 days, 24 hours a day. If someone needs something, they pick up the phone and they call us. And I think this is highly illustrative of, even we just did training for a client, and we go through the whole process. And I mean, we hit this multiple times, over and over and over and over again. And then what happens? So OSHA shows up to inspect one of their not even a subcontractor. The subcontractor hired someone to come out and just do a quick delivery, and that company had OSHA looking at their radar screen. They had an employee
Right.
complaint. Well, no one knows that. And so this company comes out, and OSHA comes to look at them, and then that subcontractor's looked at, and then the general's looked at, and then you're going, okay, so what does the employee do? Well, they walk the OSHA inspector right onto their site, into their trailer, everything, and then didn't call the boss. Well,
Right.
whose fault is that? We have a plan, we've done training. Like, whose fault is that? Matt, whose fault is that?
Yeah, it comes down to
No, whose
that
fault is it?
employee.
Whose fault
The
is it? What do we
the
always
the,
teach?
the fault is everybody.
Yeah, I
But
mean, it even
direct,
comes to
yeah,
you and I. Like, it's our
yeah,
responsibility. It's the employee's
it's my
fault, but it's
fault.
our responsibility that this guy didn't do what he was supposed to do. But
Right.
that does not mean that we don't care. It doesn't mean that we didn't put things in place. It doesn't mean that we didn't do training. It just means that this OSHA inspector who came out and started on this guy, and he's like, "Oh, this needs to be right there." No, that's not in the standard. The standard says 25 feet. You're saying that it's required to be within hand's reach. That's not even reasonable.
Yeah,
It's not
that's
written
not in there.
anywhere in the standard like that. So
It's
then
not. Yeah.
he's like telling the employee, oh, do this, do that, do this. Well, yeah, the employee gets nervous and forgets what he's supposed to do.
Yeah.
Right. So training, training, more training. Same thing here. I mean, I'm sure if you ever go into a truck stop, how busy are they?
Oh, there, yeah, there always be those ones that are on the major interstates. Forget about it. Those things. I mean, you got truck drivers are sleeping there overnight because they've got the full facilities there. So you've usually got about 10 or 15 of those. Then there's about how many cars are pulling into the gas pumps and out and pulling in to grab a snack. Those are some of the busiest spots you're going to find in the middle of nowhere. That's for sure.
Right. So if you have a spill or you have some kind of emergency, you know, you have to react to that.
Yeah.
And there's so many. We're in this zone of overkill on alarms and bells and dings and like,
Yeah.
you know, how much do you ignore even in your own car?
Right.
Right. And lights and this and that. So what's important and how do you react to that? It really comes down to training and making sure that all those boxes are checked. And it can be difficult to do that. But I think the
Yes.
biggest thing is the attitude towards the emergency response, right?
Mm,
You and I see this all the time. What
yes.
did I say when it started? That won't happen here.
Yeah. Right.
As we saw the local plane crash into the warehouse over by your house. Then directly
Yep.
after that, our client in Kingman, Arizona, an airplane crashed over there. And then we
Right.
have the soap dispense, soap detergent manufacturer had a leak, which caused this gas leak, and people didn't evacuate. And that's really interesting, right? Why didn't those people evacuate?
Yeah. And what I've looked into it and found is they're lacking in information on that for whatever reason. Either they didn't release it or what. But OSHA is alleging that, or I should say, the Department of Labor. It should be OSHA is alleging that they didn't investigate the release fast enough, or they didn't respond. So that basically just says, oh, we didn't get everybody out of there fast enough. They didn't take it seriously or urgently enough. That seems to be the stance of
Mm-hmm.
OSHA in
Yeah.
this case. But no further details about, like, okay, where did it happen? For instance, this is supposedly a mix of nitric acid, water, and phosphoric acid. So apparently they poured water into acid, Steve. I don't know, but
Right.
released the toxic cloud, and the reaction apparently wasn't strident enough, but we don't really have that information. Or if it's out there, I haven't found it yet.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to say, but I think, the question is, and the pictures are quite interesting. Let me just switch over here again. If you look at this gas cloud, it's quite interesting to see the yellow up in the air. I mean, it reminds me of the chlorine gas clouds that you see
Does, yeah.
out there. But point being is that, so let's see, they got a couple more pictures here. Point being is picture. Next one. Okay.
Yeah.
To see. Okay, fire department. Okay. You know, that those things, if you see that as an employee, I don't need to wait for my boss to go, hey, you might want to evacuate. No, I'm getting the hell out of there.
Getting out of there.
Like,
Right.
you have I mean, we do emergency action plans for people, for companies,
Yes.
and cities and schools and all kinds of stuff. So how many of these things do you need? You need emergency response plan, emergency action plan. Like,
Yep.
do you have to spell every single little thing out to people? I guess you do. I would, when I worked for a large insurance firm in Omaha, Nebraska, I would tell people all the time, like, there's a psychology to this. If you stand around and don't evacuate on the alarm, well, guess what? The
Right.
the other people are going to stand around and look too. So then no one
Yeah.
evacuates. If you see this stuff, you need to go. But I think, again, it comes down to this whole concept of what do we address? What are the realm of possibilities? And they're slightly endless. And how do we address that? And what do we authorize our employees to do? And then again, how do you take action on that? And I think it becomes very interesting when you look at these. The failure in response, I would say, if all these allegations are true, the failure in response comes down to not giving people the authority or autonomy to be an adult and do the things that they need to do in the midst of these emergencies.
Right. Right.
And
Yeah. Uh, people need to. I think, and this brings us back to the point you mentioned before with the fault and people taking responsibility. Ultimately, you got to take responsibility for yourself, and you make yourself aware of the plans. And even if you don't make yourself aware of plans, like you said, Steve, anybody seeing a toxic cloud like that in the air, or let's say seeing that big plume of smoke that we saw in the Bakersfield area when we were driving up to a client
yeah, I
last
found that notice. It was a power generation plant.
yeah, I found it too. And it is, I mean, you don't need to be told.
Hey,
You
let's drive
shouldn't.
over there and see what's going on, right, Matt? That's what you said to
Yeah,
me. You're like, look at
right.
that big giant black cloud. We should drive right into it. Makes sense.
Close enough to observe, safely observe from a distance,
Yeah,
Steve.
like 700 miles away. I
Yeah,
mean, we were 100 miles away from that. No, we were what, 80 miles away?
it was a good distance. Yeah, it was a good distance. I don't know if it was that long, but it wasn't like right next to the freeway. As
Okay, was
it
it
was a
at
city
least
that was
30
off of it.
miles away?
I'm not sure. We were on the nine. We were on the 99. I think it was in East Bakersfield. So what is that? Maybe 20 miles.
Okay.
I think on
There
the
was
other side
it
of
was a long distance, I can tell you that. I
it.
mean,
Yeah. Well, it wasn't just get off and get some gas and then go see it and then come back on.
yeah,
It's
I know. My brother just came in town and he's like, let's go see the burnt out fire stuff. And I'm like, number one, it's all closed off. Number two, like, don't be reveling in people's misery. I mean, that's horrible.
yeah. That's that's odd.
Anyway, you gotta take some responsibility for yourself. And if you are that at that level of lack of deductive reasoning where you can't think for yourself and say, you know what, I'm gonna exit this facility. Like, people need to understand this. You have a right to refuse to work in an unsafe environment. Period. End of story. If there is an IDLH, right, Matt? Immediately
Yep.
dangerous to life and health. If there's an IDLH event and you protect yourself from that, you're okay. You've done nothing wrong.
Yeah.
They cannot retaliate
Or
against you. They cannot fire you for taking a safety precaution, especially when it's immediately dangerous to life and health. And I never understood why there's not some level of responsibility on the employee side of the house to say, do we really need to come in there and tell you, boom, get out of here? Right?
right,
It's amazing to me. And the hospital incident is a little more complex because you do have patient care that you have to address, and there's just a lot to that. And so I can understand where people in those situations don't want to leave, but what is the life saving that you have to do when you see a cloud of smoke in a detergent manufacturing facility? Right? I mean,
right.
you need to move and get out of there. Now, that being said, it still goes back to the training that you're doing for your staff and the consideration of all of the emergency responses that you need to have, and have those written in the plan. I mean, we're doing the ICRA, that's the infection control response,
Yep.
and that is looking at, okay, we're working in a hospital and we have some type of containment issue where we're gonna open up drywall, or open up a water line, or be close to a water supply. How does that affect the patients in the adjoining rooms, or the congruent areas where those are located? And then how do you address those? First things in, which is never really said, but hey, if you're sick, don't come to work. And
Right.
how many people do that? I'm not feeling
Yeah.
great. I'm under the weather, you know.
Yep.
And if
And
you're in the
they'll go in.
yeah, and now if
They'll
you
go
work
in and
yeah,
yeah.
if you're working a hospital and you do that, I mean, you're just exposing everybody.
Yeah, I guarantee that even with their knowledge of those potential sicknesses, those individuals in the hospital are still going in because they feel a compulsion of duty to do it, and they understand that hospitals are often understaffed, and if they're not there, there's not necessarily someone else who can step in, or maybe someone then goes from working a 12-hour shift to an 18-hour shift or a 24-hour shift.
Yeah, well, I hope if
Uh,
you have COVID, you're not running in there. Or if you have one of the other communicable diseases in Title 20, in Section 2500, subsection J, that you're not
I,
running in there. I got
yeah,
tuberculosis. But then again, when we do our respirator fit testing and someone comes in, they're like, this is the respirator they gave me, and it doesn't fit, and you fail,
yep,
and you're working in COVID ward and tuberculosis ward. Well, I
yeah.
don't know what
This
to
is the one they
say.
had in me 3 years ago, and I've been doing this the whole time.
Exactly. So it comes down to who's doing the training and how thorough they are, and whether or not you want to cheat that system. And
Yep.
and don't get me wrong, there are employers out there that aren't always on the full up and up, or they just want to save a little bit of money, or but that comes
Right.
down to responsibility. You didn't budget properly,
Yep.
right? You didn't do your selection properly. I mean, when we were doing all those fire or all those police officer respiratory protection fit testing, they were
Yeah.
going, "Oh, we've never done this before. Like they weren't this thorough." Well, that's just the basic requirements of
Yeah,
the
we
standard.
we were just doing yeah, exactly. We weren't doing anything special, Steve. We were following the OSHA guidelines, point to point to point.
Yeah. So I think you have to stop, and you have to take responsibility for understanding what is required, look at all the possibilities that could affect you, and address those. And yes, it's going to cost money. And yes, it's going to require time. And yes, it's going to require training. And yes, it's going to require a lot more training than you think. Unfortunately, I know that cuts into profitability for private entities. I know it cuts into taxpayer dollars for the public agencies. You got to figure out, though, how to do it and make sure these things are addressed. Because I can tell you, if you're looking at like I-80 and the alleged fine of $390,000, that's a lot of manpower, training, and staffing, and everything else that goes in there just over the course of 10 years. I mean, that's 40 grand. You can do a lot with 40 grand over 10 years for training and everything else. So
Yes.
If you look at the hospital and $160,000, like, ooh, that also is a big chunk of money, and that
Yeah.
can buy a lot of training and everything. And I always tell people, it's better to give it to yourself in training, staffing, policy development, hiring consultants, than it is to give it to OSHA. And then you still have to do it.
Right. Exactly.
You still,
You're still gonna
have
have
to
to spend
do
the
it.
money at some point. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think the lesson looking at these, because when we looked at the airline crash, if you watch that previous episode and you look at the airline crash, they're like, oh, why would that happen here? Right? And we talked about all the examples of clients that we've worked with, and that won't happen here, and that won't happen here, and oh yeah, you're overzealous and you're this and that. No, I'm just telling you that if you run a truck stop and you have, I don't know, what do you have in there, Matt, at truck stops? What
Yeah,
comes into truck stops?
cars, first of all. People, of course.
Don't be an idiot. What comes into truck stops?
What comes in? What? Cars, trucks.
Trucks. Truck
Yeah.
stop. First thing he says is cars. Cars come into truck stops. Yeah, cars, trucks, carrying loads of all kinds of stuff. Why would you think? Because it's my understanding that was a vehicle that leaked on their, it was a truck that.
It was an EPA violation, not an OSHA violation. So it was an environmental.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was from, if I recall properly, I saw alleged, but one of the trucks leaked their whatever onto their property. The point being is, if you own a truck stop, what would make you think that trucks carrying loads of stuff that you have no idea what's in there is going to not stop at your truck stop and take advantage, the world's largest trucks, and take advantage? Like, you have to plan for these things and make some sense of it. So I don't know. I just, again, all of these should be really big examples to you. If you're in charge, if you own a business, or you are in charge of safety or risk, or environmental, or business continuity, or emergency response, these should all be examples that you need to get your head in the game, and you need to consider all possibilities and address them and make sure that your staff are trained. Like, this is not a job for someone that's just trying to get by. This is a really important job, and you need to treat it as such. And then these types of things will be less likely to occur. You're still going to have, a leak. You're still going to have a pipe that fails from unintended knowledge. I mean, just something out of the ordinary.
Happens.
Stuff happens.
Yeah.
And don't believe OSHA when they say, well, that's not an effective policy. I've argued it. I've already argued it on a logic statement basis. And the whole point here is that OSHA requires disciplinary action in a lot of their policies. Well, why would you need disciplinary action? Because employees do not follow the training. They act in unsafe ways. They're outside of policy. Well, that just tells you that you can do everything right and someone takes some independent action that is in violation of your policy, and you have to discipline them for it. So the logic That's part of the lot. Like they say, oh, the policy wasn't effective. No, the policy works because I did the discipline, right? I followed through on our disciplinary procedure. So things will happen. You need to be able to address them when they happen. And if you leave that part of the response out, you're just not doing anyone any justice, and you're really putting your employer and the taxpayers at risk. I mean, this cleanup of this cloud, who knows how far
Yeah.
that reached? You know, we had chlorine gas where the tank driver pulls up and accidentally puts the tube to the wrong storage container and creates chlorine gas, and it sweeps 5 miles and kills all the crops and everything else. Like that's a lot of cost.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. That's. Hey, yeah, like you said, who knows what's, I mean, take back to that factory. What's around there? Is there a school nearby? Is there a residential area? What was the dispersion uh of that cloud? Like, was it a windy day? Was it did it spread over across the city? What were the concentrations when it entered those areas? Were they harmful concentrations?
Well, it says right here, Letterkenny Public Affairs Office confirmed that a shelter in place was mandated across the Letterkenny Army Depot and for some of the township due to the leak spreading from the AFCO into the depot.
Yeah.
It's really something. So I think, if you're an employee, if you're not in one of these positions, even if you're just if you're anybody that doesn't work at these places, you have to understand that you have to take responsibility for yourself. We say it all the time. FEMA's not coming for you. Nobody's coming to help you. And it's a sad world, but the responsibility lies on yourself. You got to keep yourself safe. And if they try to take negative action against you after that, well, that's what employment
Protection.
practices, employment laws are for. That's what lawyers are for. All of those things. I hate to get to that stage, but
Right.
it's better than you dying.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I don't really have anything else to add to this except I'll drive the point home one more time. If you're in a position that's responsible for these, take it seriously and consider all types of possibilities.
Yes.
I don't.
100%.
Okay. And Matt's OSHA 30, and Matt is an OSHA 30 instructor. So if you need 10 or 30 hour, especially on construction side, that's available. And we got first aid CPR. We got all kinds of stuff. So, let us know. Leave us some comments on these YouTube channels and stuff if you're watching on YouTube, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much.
Yeah.